So those requirements are met by your millimeter wave antennas. Then at the last, we will be studying about fractal antennas. Fractal antennas are nothing but these are the self similarity structures or repeating structure which is just used to minimize your the size of your antenna. The most versatile part is that a big antenna can be miniaturized, means brought down to a very small antenna by using different fractal iterations. So basically this fractal iterations helps in changing the surface current distribution of the antenna, thereby impacting the impedance, which in terms gives you the miniaturization, then multi-band, sometimes multi-band operations, sometimes ultra wideband operations. So basically this type of antenna, fractal antennas, are required to bring down a larger antenna size to a smaller antenna size, sometimes to operate a single antenna into multiple modes, then sometimes a single antenna over ultra wide bandwidth or wide bandwidth. So we'll be seeing that antenna and we'll conclude our lectures. So all these types of antenna you can from folded dipole till horn antenna is more than enough for the PPT which I am giving to you. Then for microstrip antenna you have what you call Balanis book. It is there in Balanis book chapter 13 or 14. Millimeter wave millimeter wave antenna, whatever is there in this slide is more than enough for you to prepare. I have discussed concurrently what is required, nothing you have to go beyond that, because it is just a simple topic. You are not taking the entire course of millimeter wave antennas, so we need not have to go into much deeper. You have to just give a basic insight about millimeter wave antenna. Then fractal antenna, similarly you have to study about fractal antenna, what is discussed here, or if you want to study more you can go through those papers of mine which I have already mentioned in the first class of your antenna, this microwave engineering. Similarly for microstrip antenna also you can go through my various research papers. You will get more insight to it if you want. Otherwise whatever is there in PPT is more than enough. So let us start our class with folded dipole antennas. So basically, as we have seen, your dipole antenna consists of length lambda by 2. Now the same dipole, if it is connected end to end, if the same dipole is connected end to end, we have seen our dipole antenna is somewhat like this. So the total length from here to here is nothing but lambda by 4. Total length is lambda by 4 here. Similarly, lambda by 4 here length. So as a whole, the length total is lambda by 2 for your normal dipole. Now, in order to make it folded dipole, what we have to do? We have to just fold the another conducting wire and join from end to end of your dipole. That becomes your folded dipole. Basically, the main advantage of folded dipole is that we have to get the feeding resistance or total radiation resistance of the antenna increases. That means more or less its bandwidth increases. So because of that we use folded dipole antenna without much extending the size of your normal dipole. So let us see, when the end to end of the antenna, when the end to end of the antenna, dipole antenna, is connected together, then the antenna so formed is called as folded dipole. So here you can see only one conducting wire. This is a conducting wire, nothing but wide antenna we are talking. This is also a conducting wire, this is also a conducting wire. But if you neglect this part, if you see here, it is just a dipole antenna. Then what you are doing in this dipole antenna, you are connecting another conductor, wide conductor, and you are joining the ends of your dipole. So this gives you folded dipole. Similarly, you can go on increasing the line. If you are go on increasing the line continuously, its radiation resistance changes. So now it is 2, it becomes 2 times. If you are putting one more wire, it becomes 3 times, provided all the diameter of 3 wires remains the same. Then in that cases, its radiation resistance goes on increasing exponentially. So one wire is there, so total how many wires? 2 wires. The radiation resistance becomes twice, 2 times square, 2 to the power of 2 square. Then if 3 wire is used, 3 square. Like that it will go on increasing. So basically it gives you high resistance such that its total bandwidth get increased. So this is basically a concept of your folded dipole antenna. So when the normal end of a dipole antenna is connected end to end, the antenna so formed is called as dipole antenna. So basically this antenna is commonly used with array type antenna to increase the feed resistance. As I told you, like depending upon the number of conducting wires you use, it will increase its radiation resistance, but provided the wires which you are connecting should have same diameter. So like the range of frequency at which this particular antenna operate is from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. So this part you have to understand basically how a particular antenna is formed and its frequency range, because this is a very important parameter which you will be asked in your objective type exam anywhere, like in your what you call college for campus recruitment, or for any job interview. If you are going, generally they will ask, okay, folded dipole, tell me the frequency range, tell me the advantage, disadvantage, how it is made. So these are some fundamental concept which you should know. That's all, not beyond that. Nobody will ask you show its mathematical equation to analyze the current distribution pattern. Nobody will show. Just in university you have to learn those things, but as a fundamental, whatever thing is mentioned here, that is most important, and you have to keep those things in mind. So basically the range of this particular antenna, basically folded dipole, is nothing but it ranges from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. Now once you see, when you are joining your ends of your folded dipole, then this part is called as D, and the total length of the wire is represented as L. So always this D should be smaller than L. This is the one fundamental requirement which you should keep in mind while designing your folded dipole. You should not exceed your D more than your length. Otherwise the purpose will not be served. So that's what it is written here. Width D of the folded dipole is much smaller than the length. This particular distance between the two wires should not exceed the length of the main radiator. So basically mostly this type of antenna is used in television receiver. That I will show you the practical, how practically this antenna looks like. Already you might have seen all this type of antenna in your nearby surroundings. So you can see these are the general lookout of this antenna practically. So here you can see the dipole. Here this is a dipole, this is a dipole, this is a normal dipole, and the end of these dipoles are connected such that it give rise to your folded dipole antenna. So two folded dipole, that means more than two antenna is used here. That means a array of dipole is used here, basically used to increase your bandwidth and gain of your antenna. So practical environment where you are using dipole antenna, this is a defense platform where it is shown that in a tower a dipole antenna is used, sorry, folded dipole antenna is used. You can see 1 2 1 2, that means 4 elements of dipoles are used here. Similarly, more precise to it, you can see here folded dipole antennas are used in the form of an array. So basically for reception of signals at your television frequency range, these antennas are used. So as I told you, you have quarter wavelength from here to here. So when these lengths are combined together from both the end, you have a total folded dipole antenna with you. So this is the general concept of your folded dipole antenna. Now, so this folded dipole is divided into two parts: unequal conductor folded dipoles, and another one is multi-conductor folded dipole. In this scenario, first scenario, unequal conductor folded dipole, in that you see this distance between the conductors. So this distance between the conductor will be unequal in nature, which you can see here, this figure. So this you are seeing D1 and D2. So see the diameter of D2 wire, this I am calling, suppose say, second wire, and this I am calling as first wire. So the first type of folded dipole is such those dipoles where the wires of two dipoles are different in diameter. So the folded dipole wires, so this wire and this wire, both are having different diameter. So such folded dipoles are called as unequal conductor folded dipole. So in order to see the impedance in this, you have to find the step up ratio of this. So now the first one we are discussing, that is unequal conductor folded dipole. Here you can see it has varying effective diameter. That means top and bottom has different ratios, like different diameter it has. So in order to calculate the resistance of this particular type of folded dipole, you have to see the step up ratio, which is given as nothing but the impedance setup ratio for this folded dipole of unequal folded dipole is given here. Unequal folded dipole means the upper diameter of the wire and the lower diameter of the wire is different in what do you call length. So this setup ratio is given as 1 plus log twice of s divided by d1 divided by log twice of natural log 10, it is twice of s d2, where d1, as you have seen, d1 is nothing but the conductor of the wire for the feed arm, d2 is the conductor of the wire of the non-feed arm. Feed and non-feed, you see here, this particular line is called as feed line. So the wire connected to this is called as feeding wire. So this feed line is nothing but the line which is used to give energy to your antenna, or the line through which input is applied to your antenna. That particular line is called as feeding line, or it is sometimes called as driven element. Why? Because it acts as a source to derive the entire antenna. So power will be feeding here. So this is called as feeding line. Sometimes this entire antenna is called as driven element because it acts as a source to give power to another type of antennas. So this point is called as input signal point or driven points. So the conductor or the wire connected to this is called as a driven wire, and this is not connected to your driven point, so it is called as non-driven point wire. So that's what it is mentioned here. D1 is the conductor diameter for the feed arm. Feed arm is the arm which is used to feed the signal to a antenna. So this is connected to your feed, that's why it is called as feeder arm, and this is not connected to your feeder arm, so it is called as non-feeder arm. So D1 and D2 are the diameter of feeder and non-feeder arm, and S is the distance between the conductor. So this is the distance which you have seen, this distance between the conductor, this particular from the midpoint of the two diameter of the wire is nothing but the S. So this setup, mathematical setup, will give you to calculate the impedance of this type of dipole antennas, that is unequal conductor folded dipole antennas. You have to find the step up ratio, and corresponding to this step up ratio you have to find the total impedance of your folded dipole antenna. Now the another type of folded dipole antenna is nothing but multi-conductor folded dipole antenna. In multi-conductor folded dipole antenna, you are just going on increasing the number of conducting wires. Here you see this is the feeder arm wire, these are the non-feeder arm wire, and you are just increasing the antenna section. So this wire is nothing but called as antenna section. This wire is called as conducting wire or antenna section, both are, everything is same. So you are here, it is 3 wires. Sometimes you can use 2 wires folded dipole. Now this is 3 wire folded dipole. If you are increasing one more wire, it becomes 4 arm folded dipole antenna. If you are increasing one more arm, it is called as 5 arm dipole folded dipole antennas. So all this antenna impedance will increase that fold time, that much fold times, if the diameter of all these wires or all these antenna sections are same. So that's why it is written here. If you calculate the resistance for this antenna, it is just give you that much folded times if the diameter of these wires are same. That is given in your next slides. So basically your multi-conductor folded line means folded dipole means you can go on increasing the number of folds to according to your requirement of your wider bandwidth or radiation resistance. So this is nothing but multi-conductor folded dipole antenna. So now in case of your what you call multi-conductor folded dipole antenna, number of antenna sections, that much time is square it will be there. So now earlier if you see how many wires were there, earlier it was just 3 wire, 1 2 3. So its radiation resistance will be just 3 square. 3 square means its radiation resistance from a normal folded dipole antenna, the radiation resistance will increase 9 times. The radiation resistance will increase 9 times. If you are putting one more folded antenna section here, so now how much wire is there? 1 2 3 4. That means total radiation resistance from this single folded dipole, it becomes 4 square. That means it becomes 16 times more. So it becomes, so number of antenna sections you are increasing, that many times its radiation resistance increases. But here the condition should be the diameter of each wire should be same, otherwise this particular concept cannot be applied. So basically the basic and simple formula to calculate the radiation resistance of your RR represents the radiation resistance of a small dipole antenna is nothing but 20 pi L by lambda whole square, where L is nothing but the length of the antenna. Whatever is the total length of the antenna joined together, lambda is the wavelength. This is very important equation to calculate the radiation resistance of any wired antenna. So if your antenna is of dipole nature, you can easily calculate by putting just length value L is equal to lambda by 2, and you will get the total radiations of your antenna. So this fundamental equations has its derivations. So when you are studying your short monopole antenna or short dipole antenna or monopole antenna or simply wired and wired antennas or infinitesimal antenna, so in that this derivation is there, how you got RR is equal to 20 into pi L by lambda whole square. So this derivation is there, so you have to learn this derivation over there, and the same fundamental radiation resistance equation is applies to all type of wired antenna. So here you have to just put the length and you will get the desired radiation resistance of your antennas. Similarly, I have done for folded dipole antenna. Similarly, you can do for monopole antenna. Similarly, you can do for dipole antenna. So the various properties of folded dipole antenna is that it has ease of construction, it has very good structural rigidity. Why? Because both the end of the antennas are strongly intact with each other. It is closed with each other, so it provides the structural rigidity to the overall antenna design system as compared to your normal dipole antenna. It has two antenna sections, one antenna and another antenna folded over it, so it will give wider bandwidth as compared to your normal dipole antenna. So now, since it belongs to the family of your dipole antenna, the current distribution more or less the of folded dipole is almost analogous to your dipole antenna, that is sinusoidal in nature. Now when I talk about radiation pattern, so in the fundamental parameters that previous class we have seen, radiation pattern is nothing but it signifies how the radiations from the antenna is distributed over the free space. Basically it defines like at which particular direction antenna radiation is more prominent. So you can call it as the sensitivity of the antenna sensitivity of the antenna or sensitivity of the reflecting power in different directions. So you can tell that it basically represents sensitivity of an antenna in terms of radiating the power. So how the antenna is radiated in different direction is computed by your radiation pattern. So basically radiation pattern will give you how the beam is coming out from an antenna, whether it is directional in nature, whether it is non-directional in nature, whether it is omnidirectional in nature. All this whatever I am telling you, suppose I am telling you about bidirectional. Bidirectional means this type of pattern where you have major lobes in both the plane. So if I'm considering this as my antenna axis, so you can see the major lobe, this is called as major lobe. Major lobes are the lobes which have maximum radiation contents in it. That means the major part of power is coming out in that direction, that is represented as major lobes. So it has two major lobes oriented in two different directions, so it is called as bidirectional antenna. This is general explanation I am giving you. And omnidirectional basically represents directional in one plane and non-directional in another plane. So that is the meaning of your omnidirectional antenna. So if you are seeing all dipole antennas, so generally your dipole antenna, when I talk generally about dipole antenna, the radiation from this dipole antenna is in one plane, it is 18 figure if you are seeing in side view, and in another plane if you see from top, it will be nothing but circle in nature. So this type of antenna is called as omnidirectional pattern. That means directional in one plane but non-directional in other plane. So that type of pattern is called as omnidirectional antenna. So generally, more in layman language, your dipole antenna gives 8 type of pattern in one plane and 0 type of pattern or circle type of pattern in another plane. So here if you are orienting, depending upon the orientation, how you are orienting your antenna, you can get the radiation pattern according to that. So here when you are seeing from side, and since this particular folded dipole antenna belongs to the family of dipole antenna, that's why its pattern is more or less same as your, exactly same as your folded dipole antenna. Why? Because almost the current distribution also follows the same flowing phenomena as of your simple dipole antenna, as a result of which your radiation pattern is more or less in same manner. So from side view, if you are seeing, it is bidirectional in nature, that means it is of 8 in size. And from top view, if you are seeing, from top view, if you are seeing, it is just a simple circle. So basically it is an omnidirectional pattern. In one direction, if you are seeing, it is bidirectional in nature, that means it is directional in nature. In another plane, it is non-directional in nature, it is 0 circle. So that's why the pattern of folded dipole antenna exactly resembles your dipole antenna pattern, that is 8 type of pattern in one plane and 0 type of pattern in another plane. Basically in side view you will get 8 type of pattern, and if you are seeing from up, you will be getting 0 like pattern. So this is basically your radiation pattern of your dipole, folded dipole antenna. And this is not only for folded dipole antenna, all those antenna which belongs to the family of half wavelength dipole antenna have the similar type of radiation pattern. It is not only for folded dipole, all those antenna which belongs to the family of dipole antenna, their pattern more or less are in the same manner. We will discuss advantages, disadvantages and applications of this folded dipole antenna. As I told you, it provides structural rigidity to your overall design, so the receptions of signals are balanced in nature. So this point is more or less not that much important. But the second point, if you see, receives a particular signal from a band of frequency without using the quality, since it has good radiation resistance, increased radiation resistance, which ensures the good reception of a particular signal. Obviously, if a folded dipole is there, you will be having the total strength will be maximum, signal strength will be maximum. Why? Because your total radiation resistance is increased that much times as compared to normal half wave dipole antenna. Suppose if you are using 2 wire, so 4 times the radiation resistance is increased. If you are using 3 antenna section in a folded dipole with same diameter, it will be increased 9 times from a normal dipole antenna. So it maximizes the total signal strength. Now, what are the disadvantages of this antenna? Obviously, you will be increasing the number of antenna sections. So in order to handle this, and in order to adjust this, and in order to use this antenna in the outdoor environment, it's little bit difficult. So these 2 points are basically a disadvantage, you can tell, for your folded dipole antenna, the outdoor system management. And if you are increasing the fold of your folded dipole antenna, so the adjustment problem and the installation problems will become little bit complex. That's all. Now application, the main application of this type of antenna is used in radio receivers, in basically, and TV receivers. So if you, I don't know, like, you know, like today also in villages and all, if you go, you will find this type of antennas. And in some types of tower stations, if you go, or defense area you go, you will find this type of antenna. So basically this type of antenna is used for TV receptions, and sometimes it is used as a like feeder element in Yagi Uda element. It is always what you call good to use this type of antenna as a driven element in your Yagi Uda or log periodic antenna, because it gives that much increment in your what you call radiation resistance. So that's why it is used as a feeding element in your Yagi Uda antenna, parabolic antenna, other type of reflector antennas, and also these are the applications of your folded dipole antenna. So it is more or less same as your dipole antenna with increased radiation resistance. So another type of very important antenna is nothing but your helical antenna. As you can see, the name suggests helix. Yeah.
Can you explain what exactly do you mean by radiation resistance of an antenna?
Radiation resistance is nothing but the resistance offered by the antenna once the what you call the total power which is being radiated from your antenna. It is basically a fictitious thing which you have to consider that much part of the antenna is helping a signal to radiate in a free space. That is basically a radiation resistance. Your total antenna resistance is composed of radiation resistance, loss resistance. So the part of the signal which is actively taking part in the radiation from the antenna is nothing but taken into account from your radiation resistance. This is nothing but radiation resistance.
So,
Thank you,
so,
sir.
so radiation resistance is a good thing for us. We want it
Yeah,
to.
you should have good radiation resistance from an antenna. You should have good radiation resistance.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, shall I move ahead?
Sir, one more doubt, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, the operating range of this folded dipole lies also in microwave region, right?
Yeah.
So we have to shift from normal wires to the waveguide and all those things, right?
Yeah.
But sir, when we when you're given the formula about the radiation resistance, where we're using the diameter of the wire and the length of the wire, then how can we shift that formula to the concept of waveguides and all?
A waveguide has different structure. Wire have different structure. Where you will
Like
apply those formula, radiation resistance formula for waveguide.
that's what I'm asking, sir. Sir, how will I apply this antenna to microwave region?
This antenna is applied in microwave region only, no? See, it depending upon the size of what you call the length of the piece of wire which you are using, as compared to your what is the wavelength of that frequency if you are using. Similarly, you can design. No, what is there in that? Suppose
Okay.
you want, see, suppose you want to design your antenna. There are two length. One is electrical length, that is nothing but beta L. Beta is nothing but 2 pi by lambda. L is nothing but the physical dimension of your length which you are using. And one is wavelength. Suppose you want to design an antenna. Suppose you want to design an antenna, say for frequency. Suppose if you want to design an antenna, say suppose frequency 3 kilohertz. Okay. So then you have to just find what it's required, which type of antenna you want to use, whether you want to use wired antenna, whether you want to use aperture antenna, whether you want to use different types of microstrip patch antenna. Accordingly, its frequency can be calculated. Suppose I am talking about wired antenna. In wired antenna, more particularly, I am talking about the designing of a dipole antenna. So dipole antenna you want to operate, suppose you want to make a dipole antenna which has to operate at 3 kilohertz. So what should be the length of that antenna? The length is of dipole is given as what? Lambda by 2. Okay. So lambda is nothing but what? C by F. So what will be the total length? Into 2. This 2 I will replace here. So C is nothing but what? 3 into 10 to the power of 8. 3 into 10 to the power of 8 divided by frequency of operation. How much you want? 3 kilohertz. So 3 into 10 to the power of 3. 3 into 10 to the power 3 into 2. Understood? So that much amount of length of the wire you have to take, and you have to flare both the ends of the wire. It will give you the operation at that much particular frequency. Now, if you want to make a big antenna, say aperture type of antenna. So the aperture type of antenna, the design consideration will be different. The resonance frequency derivation will be different. Accordingly, you have to design those things. I think you have studied in your waveguides the fundamental mode of operation, dominant mode of operation, how it has to be designed. So you have to use same frequency in order to design your waveguide antenna or aperture antenna or horn antenna at this frequency. Your aperture antenna, if you want to define, if you want to use, the designing equation will change. It will no longer valid for this. Similarly, if you want to design your microstrip antenna for this particular frequency, similarly your design of operation will change, because you will be using that type of material. So depending upon the material, depending upon the wires, depending upon the apertures, your design equations will be changing. It is not the fundamental thing which remains the same for all. I hope you got, Yuvraj. I think Yuvraj, you have asked the question, no?
No, sir, it was Ayush.
Sir,
Have you got your
actually,
answer?
sir,
Whoever is there,
no,
have you got your answer? No.
no, sir.
So it
Sir,
is.
my question was,
Hmm.
sir, if I want to design the antenna for say 10 gigahertz, okay,
Hmm.
sir, I can't use a normal wire at that frequency because my conduction losses will be more in such on that
Yeah,
frequency.
not conduction losses, radiation losses will be more.
Sir, but I want my radiation losses to be more, right?
You want your radiation losses to be more.
This is the point you said just now when the Yuvraj asked, right?
I didn't mention anything about radiation loss. I mentioned about radiation resistance.
Sorry. Yes, sir.
Those two are entirely different thing. Radiation loss and radiation resistance are entirely different with each other.
Yes, okay, sir. So I can't use the wire at that frequency. I will be using a hollow metallic structure or some
Yeah, you
waveguide.
will be using waveguide at those frequency. Use it. What is there in that? What is there in that? If you want to use a wired antenna, you use array of wired antenna such that radiation loss can be minimized. But the gain, the pattern, what you will be getting with aperture antenna like waveguide, that will be far beyond what you are getting with your normal wired antenna. You cannot compare wired antenna with aperture antenna. That's the question I'm telling you. That's the answer I'm giving to your question. If you are using a wired antenna, say for 10 gigahertz, and the same frequency you are using a waveguide antenna, you will go by default, you will go with your waveguide antennas because the losses will be less. You will be getting more gain. You will be getting high frequency bandwidth. You will be getting more directive radiation pattern at that frequency when you are using aperture antenna as compared to your normal wired antenna.
Okay, sir. Yes, I got it.
That's all. You can design with anything, but the question is that ultimately what you want. Ultimately, you want a thing with good operating conditions. Now, these are used for TV reception. For TV reception, you cannot, for antenna only, you cannot invest much money. Correct? No. So normally it is used for normal household purpose where the signal you cannot transmit to longer distance. Normal gain and bandwidth requirement is there. You can go with this type of antenna. But if you want your antenna to have a higher gain, good bandwidth, directive radiation pattern, obviously for 10 gigahertz you will prefer waveguide only. Is it clear?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, next type of antenna is your helical antenna. Now, helical antenna, as the name suggests, it is in the form of helix, metallic wire wounded in the form of helix. So, which gives this type of shape, as you can see from here, this type of shapes. So, this type of antenna also it is, and you can see the number of turns depending upon the, and you can use n number of turns for an helix, but again, the efficiency of your helix depend upon the number of turns. So accordingly, you have to compromise between these two. So also this antenna is also used for broadband communication system. You can see its frequency. It can be used from 30 megahertz to 3 gigahertz frequency. So it consists of a wire in the form of a helix, which is connected to a metal plate, and the other end of the wire is connected to a thin metallic tip. So this type of antenna is widely used for your circular polarization. Why? Because it gives same signal strength at all the points. That's why this type of antenna is put on those places where circular polarization becomes a very important criteria, like for GPS applications and all. So this type of antenna find its application there. So you can see the construction and working of helical antenna. So same thing as I explained you, helical antenna or helix antenna, it is called as, is the antenna in which conducting wire is wrapped in the form of helix connected to the ground plane. Basically, this type of antenna is used to provide circular polarization. Circular polarization, I think polarization, you know, it is nothing but the strength of electric field in free space. So basically your frequency ranges is up to 3 gigahertz. So obviously you are using for extraterrestrial communications such as satellite communications are here. So basically this helix is made up of your copper wire because it should be high conducting wires, or sometimes it is like it is made up of like thick copper wire, or sometimes if you want to get more conduction of it, sometimes rare quality of some copper wire is used, but again that increases the cost. So generally we use a thick copper wire which is wounded in the form of helix to use your this type of antenna. So here if you see, this is a metallic plate, this particular is your metallic plate where the helix are connected. These are helix, these round things which you are seeing is nothing but wrapped in the form of helix. This is nothing but helical antenna, and one part of this helix is conducted what you call connected at this point, another point of helix is connected to this particular metallic strip. So based on this, it operates up to a frequency of 3 gigahertz, and due to its circular rounding nature, it gives more or less circular polarization. So practically circular polarization is what you call calculated from your axial ratio. So axial ratio generally for practical antenna, it should range between 0 dB to 3 dB. So all the practically designed antenna, in order to show circular polarization, should have axial ratio between 0 dB to 3 dB. If it goes beyond that, then we are telling those type of antennas are not giving pure circular polarization. But strictly speaking, if you want circular polarization, your axial ratio should be 0 dB. But practically it is not possible to achieve 0 dB circular polarization. So up to 3 dB we can go. So if you are getting any polarized wave axial ratio between 0 to 3 dB, then we can consider that type of antenna is giving you circular polarization. Otherwise we are getting any other type of polarization, whether it is elliptical or linear polarization. So one criteria for a antenna to give circular polarization is that your axial ratio should be between 0 to 3 dB, which is normally achieved by this particular helical antenna. So same thing, these are some basic concept of your helix. So helix is designed like this, where you can see this S represents the center point distance between one helix point to another helix point is represented as S, and this is the total distance or diameter of this particular helix, and total helix length is up to H, and the signal is flowing in this particular direction. So it is nothing but a axis of this particular helical antenna. So here the radiation from the helical antenna is very much dependent on the diameter of the helix, the turn spacing, and the pitch angle. Pitch angle is nothing but this particular angle. So it is the angle between your this spacing between the helix and the circumference of that. So this pitch angle is given as alpha is equal to tan inverse of S divided by pi d, where d is nothing but the diameter of helix and S is the spacing between the two helix from center to center point. So this particular what you call pitch angle decides the radiation performance. It generally affects very much the radiation performance of your helical antenna. And this helical antenna is always operated in two modes. One mode of operation is your normal or perpendicular mode of radiation, and another mode is axial or end fire or beam mode of radiation pattern. In normal mode or perpendicular mode of radiation pattern, the maximum strength or the maximum field strength will be to the normal to the axis. Whatever is the axis of helix, the main beam will be forming normal to that particular axis, so that you will be having directional pattern at those two axes. If you can see, this is the normal mode of operations. So suppose if I am considering this is my axis of radiation, axis of your orientation of your helical antenna, then normal to the helical antenna, normal to this particular axis of antenna, you have a radiation occurring here perpendicular to the direction of axis. So bidirectional pattern. Why? Because major lobe is formed along two directions. From this is one direction, another is this direction. So you are seeing a major lobe occurring at bidirectional point normal to the antenna, helix antenna axis. So this is called as normal mode of operation. So again, as I told you, it depends upon the helix diameter and spacing between the helix and the pitch angle. So if you are increasing the number of helix turn, so which again more or less affects the efficiency. But rarely we use normal mode of operation. Why? Because it gives less efficiency and more or less bandwidth is limited for this type of antenna. So generally normal mode of operation of helical antenna is not preferred. So this is what I have mentioned here in the form of points, which I have just explained you. So in normal mode of operation, the radiation field is normal to the helix. The radiation field is nothing but the direction of maximum radiation. That means they are talking about major lobe. Major lobes is the portion where you get maximum radiation. See, for an antenna, you will get many things. Suppose this is the pattern. Consider this is the pattern of antenna. This is one type of lobe you are getting. This is another type of load. In many of the books you will be getting this type of things. So this particular supports, this is the axis where it is oriented. So this portion what you are getting here, it is called as the portion of maximum radiation. Maximum power is coming out in this direction. It is forming a shape like this. So in this particular pattern only, we define gain, we define bandwidth, we define beam width, we define efficiency, we define directivity for this type of pattern only. And this type of pattern more or less is used to consider the co-polarization from your antenna. Now these are the patterns. These are the patterns are called as minor lobes, or basically the radiation losses lobes. These lobes generally define your cross polarization level. That means these are the lobes which gives this much is the loss incurred in the main beam. That means if these minor lobes would not have been present here, that means whatever power is wasted in these minor lobes, the same power would have been added there and this major lobe would have been increased to more power level. But since due to the surrounding, due to the interference, due to the antenna present in the vicinity, these lobes are there. Sometimes mismatching of impedance give rise to all this type of minor lobes from your antenna. This is a 3D pattern. So basically as much as possible, these small lobes or basically minor lobes or side lobes or back lobes should be avoided from your antenna to get major power flow in a particular direction. So if you see here, that is the meaning of your major lobe or maximum radiation pattern or the big lobe. So basically it is shown big lobe here. Basically it is shown big lobe here. So this big lobe represents your major lobe. So major lobe is from the maximum direction of radiation in normal mode is perpendicular to the axis of helix. So generally we don't use normal mode of operation because it gives limited amount of bandwidth and efficiency. So practically it is not used. Now the another mode which is widely used for your designing of your helical antenna or to be used for helical antenna is nothing but axial mode. In axial mode, the maximum radiation is along the axis of your helical antenna. So this was the axis, the maximum radiation is occurring along the helix of your antenna. Now see, these are the small patterns. So these small patterns are called as back lobes. This defines the loss of power from the main lobe. That means if these two minor lobes would see this are present at the sides, though it is called as side lobes, or you can call it as minor lobes, or you can call it as simply lobes, smaller lobes. So whatever apart from major lobe which you are having here, whatever lobes is present in the antenna represents the loss. So as much possible you have to reduce these losses. So here generally in axial mode of operation you will get maximum radiation along the axis of the array, and because of this little bit efficiency is increased, bandwidth is also increased, and it is good for achieving circular polarization also. So basically your helical antenna is generally operated in the axial mode of operation. That's all, nothing more than that. Now these are the various advantages of your helical antenna. It is of simple design, not though that much simple, although it is mentioned as the advantage. Okay, we can consider simple design, good directivity. Highest directivity means greater than the directivity of your dipole antenna or folded dipole antenna. It provides greater directivity. Directivity refers to the term of one or less, means gain only. Directive gain we are talking about. All these things you will be studying in the chapter 2 of your antenna. Directive gain, power gain, all these things. Then it gives wider bandwidth. Obviously it has a couple of helix wounded in the form, and it is connected to your center plate. Because of this wounding you will have a wide bandwidth as compared to your normal folded dipole antenna or dipole antenna or monopole antenna. Obviously, I told you it achieves circular position because its orientation also in terms of helix or circular in manner, which more or less helps in achieving circular polarization. So same thing, it can be used up to 30 gigahertz of bandwidth. So disadvantage is that obviously you have seen the orientation of this antenna, how much big it is. So it requires a larger space, and generally handling of this antenna becomes typical continuous maintenance and all is required. Suppose if one of the helix fails there, again you have to restructure the entire helical antenna. So these are the some typical disadvantage of your helical antenna. So the fundamental other many important other point which I have told you, that efficiency decreases when we are increasing the number of turns. So because spacing is reduced, so because of this radiation pattern is disturbed, which in turns give rise to your minor lobes, as a result of which efficiency decreases. So this was all about a brief introduction or a brief you can say about your helical antenna, brief description about your helical antenna. And this antenna can be used for space or satellite communications, or sometimes in defense for ballistic missile and satellite earth station. It can be used in radio astronomy and all, but you have to see how much directivity and all you want, accordingly it is installed. So that is the application of your helical antenna. Another important, very important antenna which we use is your Yagi-Uda antenna. So I think everybody has seen about this type of antenna, Yagi-Uda antenna, which is of this shape. This is a famous antenna which you have seen in your childhood. This type of antenna, it consists of parasitic elements, and you can see this is the place where feeding is applied. Feeding is applied means where your signal is given to your antenna. So the last portion, this portion is having the length highest among all the parasitic elements. So this is basically your reflector. This is your reflector, which is used to orient your entire pattern of antenna in a desired direction. These are called as directors. This is called as driven element, and this is called as reflector. So at the end, the reflector will be present, and the height of the length of the reflector will be maximum as compared to other director and parasitic elements length. And this particular reflector is used to orient your antenna in a particular, orient your antenna means orient the radiation pattern of your antenna in a particular direction. So this is how the radiation is produced in your Yagi-Uda antenna. So whatever radiation, suppose if some back radiations also is coming from this particular driven part, it is used to direct it in a particular direction. So this is the function of your reflector, and reflector has the highest length as compared to director and driven element. Driven element, this is your driven element. This driven element is used to provide power source to your antenna. So this driven element is generally nothing but a λ/2 dipole. It is a dipole antenna which is used as a driven element in your Yagi-Uda antenna, and this is a very fundamental antenna which you have seen in your houses when you are receiving signal in your TV of DD1 and all. So generally it operates in the range of 30 megahertz to 3 gigahertz, not beyond that. So Yagi-Uda was a two very famous scientists from Japan most probably. So no, I think Yagi was from Japan, and he has given this entire analysis of his antenna in Japanese language. This Uda has converted into English format. Whatever derivation, whatever analysis this Yagi has performed, the same has been converted into English language by this Uda. That's why the term Yagi-Uda for this type of antenna. And it is a like very famous, little bit high gain antenna as compared to your normal dipole antennas and all. So mostly it is used for TV reception. That's all what I can find till my research till date. It is generally used for TV reception and some normal signal reception and all. That's all. So we'll see this Yagi-Uda antenna construction and working. So as I have explained you, so here you can see here this point. It is seen from the figure, this above figure or below figure, whatever you want, because one figure is above also. So here if you see there are many directors placed to increase the directivity of your antenna. So if I explain here, see, this is, as I told you, this is the driven element which is used to feed the entire Yagi-Uda antenna. See, it can be in the form of folded dipole. See, both the ends are folded. So it is basically a λ/2 folded dipole antenna family. Okay. Now this last portion is nothing but your reflector, which is used to entirely direct the pattern coming in the back portion in a desired direction. This is how the radiation pattern is directed from your Yagi-Uda antenna, and these are called as director. These are called as directors or parasitic elements. This number of elements, if you go on increasing, it goes on increasing the gain of an antenna, but at the same time you have to see the spacing between these directors is a very important consideration. So based on some of the derived limit or design equations, you have to choose the spacing between your director elements, between different director elements, between director to driven element, and between driven element to your reflector. So this plays a very important role in deciding the number of parasitic element you are going on increasing, or the directivity of antenna. This implies a very important factor. Simply you cannot go on increasing the directive element of your Yagi-Uda. So it will create complexity, and you have to maintain your design in that manner also. Okay. So same thing is explained here. The center rod is nothing but your driven element. Same thing as I told you. So now see the designing of this particular, this is very important aspect. Sometimes 1 or 2 marks numericals or 2 to 3 marks numericals may be asked from here, from the designing of your Yagi-Uda antenna. So generally I told you your reflector. So your reflector is having the highest length. You can see here your reflector is having the highest length, that is nothing but 0.56 lambda. These are based on some of the fundamental derived design equations. So your reflector antenna length is around 0.56 lambda. Then the dipole length is of around 0.45 lambda. This dipole means the driven element length, which is used to feed your entire Yagi-Uda antenna, which is just in front of your reflector element. If you remember this part, this is nothing but your driven element. So this is just in front of your reflector here. If you see here, this is your reflector just in front of your reflector, and just below to your driven element is not below your director is your driven element. So same thing here, typical arrange, how it is arranged in the figure, same manner it is arranged here. So the dipole, the typical length of the dipole element or the driven element of a Yagi-Uda antenna ranges from 0.45 lambda. You cannot go beyond that. Some restrictions are there in the fundamental design. So a director should be of this much length, that is 0.55 lambda. Now the spacing, as I told you, plays a very important role. So the spacing between your director to dipole should be in the range of this 0.125 lambda, and the distance or the spacing between your dipole means nothing but driven element to your reflector should be in this particular range, that means 0.35 lambda. Same specification is tabulated here. So length of the driven element you have seen here, maximum it is going up to where 0.458 lambda to 0.5 lambda. This lambda is nothing but the wavelength at which you are operating your antenna, the frequency at which you are operating your antenna. Length of the reflector ranges from 0.55 lambda to 0.58 lambda. Generally it is taken as 0.56 lambda. Now length of, depending upon the length of director, number of director you are using continuously, it has given here. Suppose they have shown in the figure 3 directors. So the length of director 1 is 0.45. So it ranges from 0.45 to 0.35. Then the spacing, as you have seen, the spacing between the director is around 0.2 lambda. Spacing between the director, these are, no, this director cannot come here. Always it should be in this particular fashion only. It's not like that you will place your driven element after director. No, you cannot do like that. This is a standard specification you have to follow. So you can increase your director after this only. After your driven element, like this you can increase the number of directors, so to get increased directivity. So reflector spacing, should be from driven element up to 0.35 lambda, and the dipole to director spacing should be 0.125 lambda. So this is the standard design equations for your Yagi-Uda array. So this Yagi-Uda array is limited for just normal household application like TV reception and all. But if you want to use this type of antenna for practical purpose, then the extension of this is nothing but your log periodic antenna. So that we will discuss next. So we'll see the radiation pattern. As I told you, since you are using a director element, so the entire reflector is directing your antenna pattern in a particular direction. So see, the beam is directional in nature. It is following in a particular direction. It is more, the major lobe is formed along 0° axis. So if you are seeing the vertical pattern, it is more or less narrow beam in a particular direction. So from both the horizontal pattern and vertical pattern, you are seeing the radiation pattern in a particular direction. That means you can conclude that the radiation pattern of Yagi-Uda antenna is highly directive in nature. The highly directive in nature, that means it gives power in a particular direction. Okay, so this is an important point. Sometimes they may ask in your GATE examination. Generally, the minor lobes are suppressed and the directivity of the major lobe is increased by addition of directors to the antenna. This is a general 1 marks question asked in your GATE examination. So you remember just in order to increase the directivity of a Yagi-Uda antenna, you will increase the number of director. So the various advantages of your Yagi-Uda antenna is listed here. High gain antenna is achieved since you are increasing the number of director. High directivity is there. Ease of handling and maintenance. If from ages we are seeing these antennas, so it is more or less good user friendly. You can even a normal person who does not know about this orientation of antenna or electromagnetic waves and all, they can come and install this antenna just by seeing the template and it will start working. So it is like easy to handle and maintenance. If you see, like it will be mostly made up of your I think in household we use some like steel type something. It is made up of that only. You can see, like I don't know whether you have seen this type of antenna, but I think by visualizing this figure you may remember somewhere you might have seen this. So more or less you can also fit this type of antenna by seeing the figure or whatever is listed here. Similarly you can go and fit it, it will come. So it is very easy to handle and maintain. So less amount of power is wasted. Those are the important advantages of your Yagi-Uda antenna. And disadvantage is that obviously when wind and all comes, so the affection of this signal is more important. It becomes very important because it is more prone to noises and all. Sometimes you will not get signals. So these are a little bit you can tell a disadvantage, but more or less it is best suited for your TV reception. That's all I can say. So it is best suited for your TV reception. So this can be used in a normal household purpose and all. But if you want to use this type of antenna in a practical and commercial purpose, where you want something like high gain communication or highly directive radiation patterns and all for commercial and defense use, then you have to go for log periodic antenna, which is nothing but the extension of your Yagi-Uda antenna. The same directors and all are arranged in a logarithmic manner. So another type of antenna is nothing but your log periodic antenna. Okay, this log periodic antenna, again it is also used up to the frequency of 30 megahertz to 3 gigahertz. Here you can see the difference between your log periodic antenna and Yagi-Uda antenna. You can see here, see it is arranged in a logarithmic manner. The directors are arranged in a logarithmic manner. You will be having a reflector, high-end reflector obviously. Then you will be having a driven element. Yeah.
So what does it mean, like arranged in a logarithmic manner?
You see, okay. Bigger, less, like what you can tell. How can I tell logarithmic? You can visualize here like length of directors will be in what do you call logarithmic manner. So how can I explain that to you? The length, the distance of your director is nothing but in more or less in logarithmic manner with each other. I'll give you one numerical based on this director, then you will easily analyze how this are arranged in your what you call logarithmic function. There you can easily make it out. Okay, this is how. So let me complete this. Once I give you the numerical, then you will visualize it properly. Okay. So let us see this log periodic antenna. So this is same, the frequency range of operation of your log periodic antenna ranges from 30 megahertz to 3 gigahertz, and same it is more or less same in similar manner to your Yagi-Uda antenna. Now the very important characteristics of this type of antenna is that when you are operating this antenna, so it's when you are changing the frequency of operation, so the active region, I'll tell you what is active region, shifts among the elements, and hence all the elements will not be in active only at a single frequency. That means active region is nothing but it is that portion of the antenna which is actually radiating or receiving radiation efficiently. Okay, so that shifts with the frequency to which length you are shifting to. So it does not affect the entire length of the directors. So that is the special characteristic of this particular log periodic antenna, which you cannot find in case of your Yagi-Uda antenna. So here the same thing is told, and this can be understood from here. Like it exhibit constant characteristic over a desired frequency range of operation. So this constant characteristic is nothing but this particular portion, the active region, the portion of the director which is more prone to that particular frequency of operation. So all director will not be resonating at that particular, some of the directors will be resonating at that frequency which is taking part in the total radiation performance of your antenna. So this particular active region shift among the elements, and hence all the elements will not be active only on a single frequency. So this gives a peculiar advantage of this log periodic antenna as compared to your Yagi-Uda antenna, which all directors are prone to a particular frequency. All particular directors are taking part in that particular frequency of operation, which is not in the case of your log periodic antenna. So basically we use log periodic antenna in forms of array, and the mostly used log periodic is in the form of dipole, so which is also called as LPDA, log periodic dipole array. So this is how the design and the dipole length and the separations of your log periodic antennas are arranged. This is how you are arranged. That means this is R1 to this is number of parasitic elements. The separations between the distance between the feed and the dipole, R1 by R2 is equal to R2 by R3 is equal to R3 by R4 is equal to T, and in the same manner this length of the dipole is related like this, L1 by L2 is equal to L2 by L3, L3 by L4. So this is the design equations which you have to follow to form your log periodic antenna. That's all is your log periodic antenna. So if by doing so you have good gain and directivity as compared to your normal Yagi-Uda antenna, and thus it provides greater flexibility in design when you are using it for commercial purpose, which was not in the case of your Yagi-Uda antenna. Same as I told you, more or less it follows the same behavior of your dipole antenna. It belongs to the category of your dipole antenna. The pattern is more or less same. You can see bidirectional pattern at side view and zero almost zero. Like see here, you can see because of the disturbance or interferences from the vicinity of the devices, it is having some lobes present here. Otherwise, it is more or less circular in nature. Now this represents that there are some interference which are affecting this particular pattern. So more or less the pattern is what you call as like your dipole antenna. That's all. So you can see for bidirectional log periodic antenna, the maximum radiation is around the broad side. This is broad side, which is normal to the surface. This is Z here, and normal to the surface, you are getting your broadside pattern. That means the major lobe is around both the sides, and these are nothing but the side lobes, which is due to the objects or interferences which is present in the vicinity of your antenna. These are basically a cross polarized power levels, and these are co-polarized power levels. All these things you will come to know in a greater manner when you are studying the basic derivations of all these antenna. So this is all about your radiation pattern of log periodic antenna. So advantage is that design is compact, gain and radiation patterns are varied according to the requirement, and little bit greater gain you will get and directivity you will get as compared to your Yagi-Uda antenna. So disadvantage is that obviously mounting it in a roadside or maintaining it in outside area, outside environment is little bit a hectic task. So external mounting is a problem, and installation cost is high. It is used same high frequency communication up to 3 gigahertz, used for practical sort of, basically it is used for TV reception and satellite communication or defense applications and all. And this type of antenna nowadays used in the form of microstrip antenna. In microstrip antenna, we are using this, we are making this log periodic antenna in the form of microstrip patch, and there we get added advantage. We can mount it at any place, and like whether it is aircraft, spacecraft, or anywhere, we try to mount it and we get more gain as compared to normal your microstrip patch antenna. So there it has several advantages as compared to normal wired antennas once you are modeling this type of antenna in your microstrip patch. That we'll see later. So another type of antenna is nothing but your horn antenna. So this is another very important high gain antenna which we can see everywhere. So basically, if you have a tower and all beside your home, you can just see and you will find this type of structure over there. More or less this type of structure, if you can see, that is nothing but your horn antenna. So horn antenna up to 30 gigahertz you can go. You can see other wired antennas, it is much limited for your 3 gigahertz or 2 gigahertz frequency range. But once you are seeing your waveguide type of antenna, it is going up to 30 gigahertz. So generally this type of antennas belongs to the category of aperture antennas. So your normal waveguide, if you have a rectangular waveguide, suppose if you have a rectangular waveguide, and if this rectangular waveguide is flared at the end, if this rectangular waveguide is flared at the end, you will get a horn antenna. So it becomes more or less in the shape of a horn. So that's why the name is called as horn antenna. So this is a normal waveguide which is acting as a transmission line, and the same transmission line, waveguide transmission line, if you are flaring at the end, it becomes a waveguide. See here, the flaring of your normal waveguide, it becomes a horn antenna. So this is a type of aperture antenna. It doesn't fall in the category of your wired antenna where you have seen your folded dipole or Yagi-Uda antenna or folded dipole antenna. It has some area, so it comes to the category of your aperture antenna. So horn antenna is nothing but you may be considered as a flared out waveguide, as I told you. Now, to improve the radiation efficiency and directivity of the beam, the waveguide should be provided with an extended aperture. Extended aperture means extended opening, extended area, to make the discontinuity of the wave into gradual, just to make the wave to acquire more aperture area such that the total radiation performance of that particular antenna increases, which in turn increases the directivity and gain of your antenna. So this is done by simply flaring your antenna. Flaring is nothing but the extending the open end of your waveguide is flaring, and flaring is just done to increase the directivity of your antenna. That's all, nothing beyond that. So the frequency range of your horn antenna ranges from 300 megahertz to up to 30 gigahertz. So now there are various categories of horn antenna. So basically, depending upon the orientation of your horn antenna, we categorized it into different parts. So we have a type called sectorial horn, then we have pyramidal horn, then we have a conical horn antenna. Okay, so instead of going all these points, I will just go to this particular different types of horn antenna and explain here itself. Now, I told you that horn antenna is categorized into different parts, different types: sectorial horn antenna and pyramidal horn antenna and conical horn antenna. So in sectorial horn antenna, if the opening is done in a particular direction, if the opening of the antenna is done in a particular direction, that means in a particular flow of field, then that type of antenna is called as sectorial horn antenna. Okay, so sectorial horn antenna, you see basically these two. If the antenna, if a rectangular waveguide, I am talking about rectangular, suppose say I take an example of rectangular sectorial horn antenna. That means if a rectangular waveguide is flared in one direction of the electric field, then that type of antenna, or if it is flared in a particular direction of magnetic field, then that is just one plane, either in the plane of electric field, either in the plane of magnetic field, in just one plane. So that type of antenna is called as sectorial horn antenna. That means if your H-plane antenna, sorry, if your rectangular waveguide is flared in the direction of magnetic field, if your rectangular waveguide is flared in the direction of magnetic field, then such type of antenna comes into the category of sectorial antenna, and it is called as sectorial H-plane horn antenna. Okay, or H-plane sectorial horn antenna. Why? Because flaring is done only in one direction. Similarly, you can see the direction of magnetic field here. HA represents your magnetic field. So the flaring is done in the magnetic field direction. So this type of antenna comes under the category of sectorial horn antenna. If you see another type of sectorial horn antenna is E-plane sectorial horn antenna. See here, E-plane is vertical. Now opening is horizontal. That means it is flared in the horizontal part. Now for electric field, see, it is flared in the vertical opening. See, the flaring is done in the vertical end. So that means this categorized in one particular direction opening. So this comes under the category of your sectorial horn antenna. If the flaring is done in the direction of magnetic field, then such type of sectorial horn antenna becomes H-plane sectorial horn antenna. If the same opening is done in the direction of electric field, then it becomes E-plane sectorial horn antenna. So basically for sectorial horn antenna, only it is flared in a particular direction. If it is flared in the direction of electric field, it becomes E-plane sectorial horn antenna. If it is flared in the direction of magnetic field, it becomes H-plane sectorial horn antenna. Now another type of horn antenna is pyramidal horn antenna. So you can see here flaring is done in both the parts, in magnetic field direction as well as in electric field directions. So when the flaring is done in both the direction of electric field as well as magnetic field, then such type of antenna is called as pyramidal horn antenna. So this you have in your lab, you have experiment also for this type of antenna. So when the flaring is done only in one direction, then you have what? Sectorial horn antenna. If the flaring is done in two direction means both electric field and magnetic field, then you have pyramidal horn antenna. These are the different forms of rectangular waveguide. Now, if your normal circular waveguide is flared at the end, so you can see these are rectangular in shape. These waveguides are rectangular. This is waveguide. This is your waveguide. Again, this is your waveguide. So now if you see this antenna is nothing but it comes in the form of circular nature. That means here you can see this waveguide is basically a circular waveguide. So when the ends of a circular waveguide is flared, then you get conical horn antenna. So you have biconical horn antenna and discone antenna. So if a normal circular waveguide is flared, so this is a circular waveguide, and this circular waveguide when flared at the end, see this end of the waveguide, circular waveguide is flared, then you get conical horn antenna. Then in conical horn antenna again you have two types, biconical horn antenna and discone antenna. So basically those comes under the category of your circular horn antenna. So this sectorial horn antenna and pyramidal horn antenna are those antenna in which the rectangular waveguides have its end flared in a particular direction. So if it is flared in a particular direction of electric field, it is called as E-plane sectorial horn antenna. If it is flared in the end of magnetic field, then it is called as H-plane sectorial horn antenna. Now, if the flaring of a rectangular waveguide is done in both the end, in the direction of electric field as well as magnetic field, then that type of antenna is called as pyramidal horn antenna. And when the flaring is done in a circular waveguide, then such type of antenna is called as conical horn antenna. Similarly, that particular things are explained here. So as I have explained you, sectorial horn antenna flaring is done only in one direction. If the flaring is in the direction of electric field, then it is called as E-plane sectorial horn antenna. If flaring is done in the direction of magnetic field, then it is called as H-plane sectorial horn antenna. And pyramidal horn antenna is what? If the horn antenna has flaring on both the sides. If the flaring is done in the both ends, that means both E and H, then we have a pyramidal horn antenna. In conical horn antenna, when circular waveguides are flared, it is called as conical horn antenna, and basically it is of two types, biconical horn antenna, and discone antenna. That's all. Discone antenna. So this is just a type of horn antenna which we have seen. Now some of the important points you note down. This is important for your GATE examination or any competitive examination. So flaring helps to match the antenna impedance with free space impedance for beta radiation. For beta radiation means for desired amount of directional pattern, because these are high gain antennas. So it avoids standing wave ratio and provides greater directivity and narrower beam width. So there is a relation between directivity and beam width. So all those things you will study in your chapter 2 of your antenna, and there is a very fundamental derivation. D directivity is equal to 4 pi divided by beam angle. That means if the beam is more narrower, directivity will be more. So all these things you will study in your chapter 2. The derivation, full derivation is there. So basically, in order to have your better directivity, you should have a narrower beam width. So that can be achieved by using flaring in horn antenna. So flare angle of the horn antenna is an important factor to be considered. If this is too small, then the resulting wave will be spherical instead of plane, and the radiated beam will not be complete directive in nature. It will try to achieve the shape of an omnidirectional pattern, which we don't want from an horn antenna. We want the beam to be exactly more or less narrow and directional, full directional in nature. So based on that, you should choose your flare angle such that it gives a greater directivity with narrower beam width. Now there are two combinations of your horn antenna. So horn antenna are combined with your parabolic reflector antenna. In the first class I told you what are reflector antennas. In reflector antennas, the beams are directed over a longer distance by the phenomena of reflection, because a large dish antenna will be there. Basically, what is the basic function of your reflector antenna? You will be having a dish which is used to reflect the wave to a longer distance, and you will be having a horn antenna as the feeding element. Then whatever signal coming to here, it redirects to your dish and it covers a longer distance like this. Whatever comes to this horn antenna feeding element, it gives to your dish. It strikes, the signal strikes here, again it is moving to a larger distance. Now this particular arrangement is called as your parabolic reflector. In parabolic reflector, generally we have horn antenna as a feeding element. Now the combination of horn antenna and parabolic reflector forms basically two types of combinations. One is Cass horn antenna and one is hog horn or triply folded horn antenna. These are the high gain antenna, highly directive in nature, and tends to reflect the signal or receive the signal over a longer distance. See, these are the example, these are the layout, pictorial representation both of Cass horn antenna and hog horn antenna. So here you can see an opening is there which is used to redirect the wave in case of Cass horn antenna, but in case of hog horn antenna you can see this is fitted over a wheel, and according to it is fixed and the signals are radiated. Now you see what is this, I'll explain here. In Cass horn antenna, radio waves are collected by the large bottom surface, okay, which is parabolic, curved and reflected upward at a 45-degree angle. Basically all these antennas are used for your radio astronomy. So after hitting the top surface, they are reflected to the focal point as I have explained you. The gain and beam width are just like parabolic reflectors, such that the signals travel to a longer distance, giving a narrower beam, thus increasing the total directivity of your antenna. So this is the case of your Cass horn antenna. But in case of your hog horn antenna, if you see, a parabolic cylinder is joined to a pyramidal horn where the beam reaches apex to the horn. It forms a low noise microwave antenna. So here it is talking about this particular orientation where it is joined to your pyramidal horn, and here the beam reaches to the apex, and then from here it starts its operation. So basically the advantage of this type of antenna, basically hog horn antenna, that its receiving point, if you see, the receiving point does not moves even though the antenna is rotated. See here wheel is there, even though if this antenna is rotated, then the receiving point is unchanged, it doesn't move. So this helps in achieving a greater directivity and reception of your signal. The radiation pattern of your antenna is same. I told you it is fully directional in nature, and as waveguide is used, so it will be guiding the waves in a particular direction. So waves are guided in a particular direction. If you join this, it forms a directional pattern here. So your waveguide guides the pattern of a wave in a uniform direction such that the total beam becomes directional in nature, and thus the beams have high directivity. Now these are the various advantages of your horn antenna. It has small minor lobes. Then impedance matching is good since the flaring is done by keeping flare angle in by choosing the flare angle in a proper manner. So impedance matching is achieved. Greater directivity. Why? Because directional in nature and that beam is nothing but narrower. Obviously, if impedance matching is good, then you have good standing wave ratio. That means good standing wave ratios are avoided. It's generally in the acceptable limit between 1 to 2 in practical scenarios. Then you have some fundamental disadvantages. So the disadvantages of your horn antenna is like flaring angles is an important parameter, which I have told you is a very important factor. You have to choose this flaring angle of flare angle in a proper manner, because the entire operation of antenna depends on this. Horn antenna depends on this. Entire operation means directivity. Directivity means nothing but radiation pattern. Radiation pattern means nothing but gain. Gain is nothing but the power coming out from your antenna. So how power is coming out of your antenna is nothing but how much it is matched. So all these conditions are interrelated with your flare angle. Okay, flare angle and length of the flare should not be very small. So again, proper designing of flare angle and the length is an important consideration. As I told you, the application of this horn antenna finds in astronomical studies and microwave applications. Horn antenna just used with the reflector antenna for your TV receptions, sometimes satellite communications. If you can go, you can see there large dish antennas are used. In between that, horn antenna is used as a feeder to provide satellite communication, TV receptions. In your normal home DTH, you have your horn antenna combination with your dish antenna. So these are the practical examples of horn antenna. So this is all about your horn antenna. So the next type of antenna is nothing but your microstrip antenna. So this is another type of very versatile antenna which is used nowadays. Nowadays means like from last 10 years. 10 years means what? 20 years, 20 years, 25 years. It has given a boom to the entire antenna society. Like if you see now, researchers are more focused on this type of antenna. So let us see what is your basically microstrip patch antennas. So your telephones and all, your smartwatches and all, you have microstrip patch antenna installed in all these devices. So let us see what is this microstrip patch antenna. So these PPTs are taken from Balani's book, and in Balani's book your microstrip patch antenna is in chapter 14. So basically in high performance aircraft or spacecraft or in satellite communications, where we have size limitations, weight limitations, cost limitations, performance and ease of installation, so are a big constraint. So in this constraint, in order to remove this constraint, a very popular antenna which is employed is nothing but your microstrip antenna. Okay, so because you know in what you call spacecraft and all, like defense or like where you have to have your antenna very small in size, less in weight, so all these antennas should be low profile. So the ultimate solution for all this is nothing but only one antenna, that is nothing but microstrip patch antenna. So to meet all this requirement, we have microstrip antennas. So these antennas are low profile, conformable to a planar and non-planar surface. That means you can mold it in any manner, variable type, non-variable type, conformal, non-conformal, many types you can make it. It is inexpensive and it can be like used with modern printed circuit technology. Mechanically, it is mechanically robust. Then it can be mounted with on rigid surfaces. It can be compatible with your MMIC. MMIC is nothing but monolithic microwave integrated circuit. So this have all the features which you require for installation. It possesses all this phenomena with it. That's why it is more versatile antenna nowadays and for future wireless communication system also. Okay. So this provides good like in case of what you call, if you want to have like a particular design or particular shape, like patch shape, where like say suppose if you have a particular, if you choose a particular patch shape and you can select a particular mode of operation like easily, where you can easily tune the resonant frequency, polarization, pattern, and impedance. So just by selecting the patch type, patch dimensions and all, you can tune all these parameters. When you are tuning all these parameters, it becomes easy for you to analyze the entire behavior of your antenna, and moreover these are planar and conformal to all the planes, so you can install it anywhere. And the hindrance of the wired antennas or horn antennas can be overcome by using this type of antennas. And it is, as I told you, it is what I call it provides good integration with MMIC circuits, and also it can be formed in the form of a chip and all. You can use basically in cell phones and all, it is used in the form of chip, and where the entire your cover back cover of your cell phones is made up of this microstrip patch antennas, where easily you get the operations and all. So these are the versatility of this particular microstrip patch antenna. So basically, what is a microstrip patch antenna? So microstrip patch antenna is nothing but it is a metallic strip or a patch mounted on dielectric layer which is supported by a ground plane. So this is your rectangular microstrip patch antenna. So this is your patch which is responsible for radiation. From here the radiation happens from this particular patch. This patch is also called as a radiating part of the microstrip antenna, and this patch is energized. Energized means power is provided to this patch by using this particular line. This is called as feed line or microstrip feeding. So this is of rectangular in shapes. It is called as rectangular microstrip feed. So this particular line is used to feed the patch. These are field lines. These are field lines. So this is the length of your patch. This is the width of your patch. This is how the simple orientation of your antenna is shown in XYZ plane. Now the entire antenna, this is entire, and this particular patch is made up of copper. The conducting material which patch this feeding element is made up of is nothing but a copper. So this patch is kept on a substrate. This white part is nothing but substrate. So this is the upper part of the substrate where you have a radiating patch feeded by a feed line, and this substrate back plane, this yellow part, black part, is also made up of conducting material of copper. So the entire ground plane is covered with copper, and this ground plane is separated from the upper plane with the height of the substrate. So this height of the substrate is represented as H. So, and the dielectric constant, every substrate has a dielectric constant and is represented as epsilon r, and this dielectric constant plays a very important role in deciding the bandwidth, the operation of frequency of your antenna. Depending upon the different dielectric substrate, you can have different types of performance characterization of your microstrip patch antenna. So you can see, if you are using a FR4 substrate, that FR4 substrate are the most commonly used substrate because it is available everywhere in the commercial market, and it is of low cost, cheap, but it can be used up to a frequency of around 5 to 6 gigahertz, not beyond that, because beyond that it operations goes on degrading. It gain and all, it goes on degrading. It becomes very much lossy. So if you want to go beyond 6 gigahertz operation or 7 gigahertz operation, then you have to choose another type of substrate. So RT durites are there, polyamide substrate are there. So these are substrate which are not flexible. Nowadays all these microstrip antennas are made on flexible substrate. Flexible substrate, you have a jeans cloth, no, that jeans cloth can be acted as a substrate, and that is flexible in nature. You can install it anywhere, you can wear with your skin also, and you can have performance characterization of transmission and reception of signal. This type of flexible substrate you can use for microwave imaging in brain tumor detection, breast cancer detection. Then you have what you call like many etc. Many other applications. You have this type of antennas where like cotton material you have. What you do, you just take a piece of cotton and upper part of cotton material you coat it with copper, below part of cotton you coat it with copper, then you analyze, make antenna and analyze it in a software and practically validate it. If the signal characterization and all radiation performance and all of this type of flexible substrates are good, then you can use it for what you call your commercial purpose. So nowadays all these type of antennas are becoming very popular. Why? Because you can fit it anywhere, you can put it on your skin also and you can move around. So that is another advantage of patch antennas, microstrip patch antennas, which I told you. So substrate, like based on the different dielectric materials, so you can make different types of antennas. So the dielectric substrate plays a very important role in the designing of a microstrip patch antenna, and the dielectric substrate is dependent on loss tangent. Loss tangent is represented as del sigma upon omega epsilon. All thing I don't know whether you have studied in your electromagnetic field theory in time varying fields or not, loss tangents and all. So based on this, the loss tangents affect the performance of your antenna drastically, and it is interrelated with your dielectric constant. So based on this, you can decide which substrate to be used at what particular frequency of operation, and whether you want to use flexible substrate, whether you want to use non-flexible substrate. Suppose for your cell phones and all, you require non-flexible substrate because your cell phones is rigid in nature. So you can go for this type of substrate, FR4 substrate, yeah, RT-Duroid substrate. All those things you can go and you can make your antenna operating, and you can see, well, all these things are now used, whether it is your cell phone of any type. So these are the advantages and these are the things which you have to learn in your microstrip antennas. So generally this is one part. So basically microstrip antenna consists of a rectangular patch. If I talk about rectangular patch, if it consists of a patch which is responsible for the radiations of signal, and this patch is fed by a microstrip line that is called as feed line, and the entire patch is deposited on a substrate on one side, and the another side of the substrate is coated with a conducting material. So the generally conducting material for upper patch and the lower patch is a copper. So this is the side view of your microstrip patch antennas, where you can see this is your upper patch, this is your lower patch. Lower patch is called as ground plane, ground part, back plane, back part, anything you can call it as. This is also made up of, see, whatever material is made up of upper patch, the same material, same conducting material is made at in the ground plane. That's why the color is same for both black and black. This means that the conducting material used for upper patch is same as the conducting material used for your ground part. Okay, just wait 1 minute. I have to download the attendance sheet. I have not downloaded the attendance sheet. Yeah, I have downloaded the attendance sheet now. Okay, so this is the side view of your patch antennas. So all these things, these microstrip patch antennas have received all this considerable attention right from the beginning during 1970s only. And what you call once the patent has been filed in 1955, after the development started like anything, and after the discovery of your transistors and all, and the integration of this proved to be good with MMIC, this has like boomed the wireless communication like anything. Now entire research is going on. microstrip patch antenna, where you see whoever are the antenna engineers, they like 90% of the antenna engineers works on this patch antennas, whether that can be taken as flexible, they can work on flexible substrate, non-flexible substrate, but microstrip type of antennas only. Okay, so this is basically your microstrip antenna brief description. So this is the coordinate system which is used to analyze this. You have to study in your chapter 2. The same analysis remains the same. That you have to analyze the field of operation at the far field of the antenna, which is nothing but r theta phi. So this is the far field from this particular point, observation points. All these analysis you have to take at far field only in Fraunhofer region. So you will read all these things detail in your chapter 2. So now another important thing I told you is that microstrip antenna finds application because of its different shapes. You can make any type of shape. It is having greater flexibility. So if you are making a patch radiator, as I told you, this radiator, if this radiator is of square in nature, it becomes a square microstrip patch antenna. If it is of rectangular in shape, it becomes rectangular microstrip patch antenna. If it is of circular in nature, it becomes circular microstrip patch antenna. So whichever type of patch you want, you can make it. This is the versatility of this particular patch type of antenna. So you can have different types of patches, like square you can have rectangular, you can have dipole, you can have circular, you can have elliptical, you can have ring sector, you can have circular ring, disc sector, triangular, any shape, your shape, face shape, hand shape, anything. But the resonance frequency and the operation of the antenna has to be justified with that particular shape. Suppose if you are using your square shaped antenna, then the resonance frequency of the square shaped antenna should justify why you have taken this particular square shape. If you would have taken rectangular shape, then what would be the effect on resonance frequency, gain and directivity of your antenna? So why you have taken a particular shape, that justification is very important from the researcher's point of view. Otherwise, you are free to use any type of shape, Indian flag shape, any type of shape, whatever is there in that, provided you provide a proper justification of its operation of resonance frequency. Like if you would have not selected that particular type of shape, what would have been the effect of resonance frequency? Or if you have selected why that particular shape and how it gives the resonance frequency. So those justification becomes very important. If you are choosing anything for any design of a microstrip patch antenna, so justification is necessary. So the most popularly used shape are rectangular shape and circular shape. Because of ease of analysis in these two type of shapes, we generally go for circular and rectangular shape antennas. And in this rectangular patch of antenna, you can modify this rectangular shape to any of the shape which you want. You can modify any of the circular shape which you want, but the basic principle of governing the fundamental resonance equations remains more or less the same. So that's why, because of ease of analysis and design flexibility, mostly used antennas, microstrip antennas, are rectangular or circular in shape. So there are various advantages. Already a big lecture I have given you, what are the advantages of microstrip patch antennas. These are low profile antennas. These are conformal to non-planar surface, simple and inexpensive. These are mechanically robust, compatible with monolithic microwave integrated design circuits, very versatile if it comes in the terms of resonant frequency, if it comes in the terms of polarization, terms of patterns, impedance, all these things. So, but however, with all these advantages, there are several disadvantages also. The main disadvantage of this type of microstrip antennas are that it has lower power. It gives a very narrow bandwidth. That's why you cannot use a normal microstrip patch antenna where the bandwidth requirement is more. So you have to go for array type of antenna, or you have to do some type of research activity in a normal patch antenna to enhance the bandwidth, to enhance the frequency efficiency of an antenna. Then it suffers from spurious radiations, nearby radiations. So in case of large arrays, if you are making microstrip arrays, there is a trade-off between bandwidth and the scan volume. Scan volume is nothing but how the antennas are oriented. A particular object is checked at different angle orientation. So there is a trade-off between bandwidth and scan volume. Then large size, if you are going to use this microstrip patch antennas for VHF and UHF band, then the physical size of this patch antenna increases. Why? Because lambda is equal to C by F. Same fundamental equations is followed here also. So because of this, the total physical size of your patch increases. So if physical size of patch increases, means that much amount of slot you should have in your circuit to adjust that much size antenna, so that it becomes a little bit hindrance, or you can say it a disadvantage. Now there are different types of feeding mechanism. As I told you, what is feeding? Feeding is nothing but how you energize or how you provide power to your patch. So this is a type of microstrip feedings. Here you put a voltage source, here you put VI waves, you give here normal, it is connected to your source. So this is how you feed your antenna. So how many types of feeding is there? There are different types of feeding methods in order to give or in order to supply energy to your patch antenna such that it emits the radiations, and the performance of the antenna is very much dependent how you provide feeding to your microstrip patch. So there are four popular method or four popular techniques by which we provide feeding to our microstrip antennas. So first one is your just give me 10 minutes. After that we'll wind up the class, because after this four will continue from tomorrow. Directly design will come. So just you see, it's nothing but 4 points are there. So we have 4 popular types of feeding techniques which is used to feed your microstrip antennas. So first one is your microstrip line. As I told you, the example which I have shown you is nothing but it is a microstrip feeding. So another type of feeding is probe feeding or coaxial feeding. Third is aperture coupling feeding, and fourth one is your proximity couple feeding, nearby feeding. So this is a microstrip feed line which I have shown here. So the microstrip line feed is easy to fabricate, simple, okay, and like it provides simple to match by controlling the inset position. These are inset positions, easy to match this inset position, okay, rather than a simple model. Okay. However, the substrate thickness, as the substrate thickness increases, surface wave and spurious feed radiation increases. That means from here the radiation increases very much. So this is basically this is how the microstrip feeding is done. Now second type of feeding is your coaxial feeding. In coaxial feeding, you have an inner conductor of the coax which is attached to the radiation patch. Here you can see this is your radiation patch, and this coax is attached to this radiation patch, and the outer of this is connected to the ground plane. This is connected to your ground plane. Okay, so this is connected to your radiating patch, and the outer part of this coax is connected to your ground plane. So this is how the coaxial feeding is provided to your patch antenna. Now if I see aperture couple feeding, so in this what you have both microstrip feed line and the like coaxial. In this probe symmetries which are provided, see here you have one substrate here, another substrate here, and feeding is provided analogous to this. This is microstrip feeding provided to this particular aperture coupled feed microstrip patch antenna. Now another type of feeding is nothing but your proximity feeding. So here you will have, if in case you see aperture couple, here you see the dielectric substrate, second dielectric substrate is at the another end. But in case if you see proximity feeding, you have superposition of both the dielectric substrate over here itself, and your patch will be on the top of your first substrate, will be provided with a microstrip feeding. This is called as proximity, means nearby feeding, or the coupling feeding mechanism from this particular substrate to this particular patch using microstrip line. So when I compare all these feeding method one by one, so we'll see what are its particular feeding methods, their main points. So in case if I see microstrip feed, these are easy to fabricate. They have simple to match by controlling the insert feed position. As I told you, it has low spurious radiation. Spurious radiation means nearby radiations from the field point, like as low as minus 20 dB. It provides narrow bandwidth. So it provides generally narrow bandwidth. So if you want to use your antenna which have wider bandwidth, so in that case you have to change the feeding option. So narrow bandwidth generally 2 to 5%. Now another disadvantage of this microstrip feeding is that as
Sir, we can't hear you.
you have class, huh? Hello, are you able to see my PPT?
So yes, we
Yes,
are
sir.
able to see.
Yeah,
but
just give me 5 more minutes. Just we'll discuss the important points and then we'll leave the class. Otherwise, tomorrow you have to give exam also and I have to complete 2 portions also. So it will again drag to next class. So unnecessary, why to drag it? So in case of coaxial feeding, again it is easy to fabricate and match means impedance matching. It has low spurious radiations, nearby radiations up to as low as minus 30 dB. So it has better spurious radiation. Over the entire patch. Suppose this is your patch. You can't
hear you, sir.
I think here network quality is very bad. So I'm getting continuous message. Now is it now I'm audible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Here bandwidth problem is there. College, I don't know. So narrow bandwidth, it also gives a narrow bandwidth 1 to 3%. So it is more difficult to model, especially for thickness. If you have a substrate whose thickness is greater than this, that means if the height of the substrate or the thickness of the substrate is greater than lambda by 50. So lambda is nothing but the free space wavelength. Then we have another type of aperture feeding, that is nothing but aperture coupled feed. Again, it is easier to model. Moderate spurious radiation when you see as compared to your microstrip feeding and coaxial feeding. In this ground plane between substrate, isolate the feed from the radiating element. As you can see here, same thing, we were using 2 substrate, epsilon R1 and epsilon R2. One substrate here, sorry, second substrate here, one substrate here, and between this we have. So same thing it is being told here. Ground plane between substrate isolates the feed from the radiating element and minimizes the interference. So this is a big advantage as compared to your microstrip feeding and coaxial feeding. So independent optimization of the feed and radiating element can be achieved. But once it comes for fabrication, so this becomes a very difficult to fabricate. So one of the most difficult feeding mechanism, once you are once you have modeled your microstrip antenna by using aperture coupled feeding, and once you are going for fabrications, it becomes very difficult to fabricate because you have to take into this particular point very importantly into consider in your practical aspect. Otherwise there will be a problem in impedance matching, which therefore will hinders your bandwidth and gain. So okay, but entire or microstrip patch antennas have low bandwidth. So this particular feeding mechanism also provides you low bandwidth. So another thing is that typically high dielectric material is used for bottom substrate and thick and low dielectric constant for the top. So this is another constraint in order to use this feeding. So you have to use a a typically high dielectric substrate at the bottom last, that dielectric substrate 2 should be of higher dielectric material as compared to the top one. So in case in this feed line width, slot size and position and electrical parameters of substrate can optimize design and match. So all these particular parameters has to be taken considered to provide good feeding mechanisms to your modeled antenna by using aperture coupled feeding. So more or less this is analogous, or more or less proximity coupled feed is better as compared to your microstrip feeding, coaxial feeding, or aperture coupled feeding in terms of bandwidth. So out of these three, this provides the highest bandwidth up to 13%. Others we have seen it was ranging from 1 to 3%. But in case of your proximity coupled feed, so how this is providing greater bandwidth, smaller bandwidth, these are again full derivations are there and full practical analysis are there, which is not possible for me to teach you. It takes around 20 to 25 hours again to teach those concepts for each feeding mechanism, the design and all those for those antennas. So you have to just a small thing I'm telling you, just a brief introduction of all these things. That's all. I cannot go in depth like I would have shown this how this is, and but again for that becomes one complete subject itself. So you just remember that proximity coupled feed requires a highest, sorry, it gives a highest bandwidth as compared to your microstrip, coaxial and aperture coupled feeding. Easier to model, low spurious radiation, nearby radiation, but again same thing is coming into picture. It is more difficult to fabricate, as we have seen in case of your aperture coupled feeding. So again, in order to provide good impedance matching, so you have to have good alignment of length of feeding stub and width to line ratio, so that good impedance matching could be ensured. Now from this I will teach you, from tomorrow I will teach you from this particular point what are the various method of analysis of your patch antennas. There are different types of method by which we design our microstrip patch antenna. So basically we have transmission line model, cavity model and full wave model. Out of this we will be following this particular model to design our microstrip antennas. All these models are not there in our syllabus and will not see this. So tomorrow we'll discuss transmission line model analysis for our designing of microstrip patch antennas. So just one design, then it's numerical, then circular patch antenna, it's design, and that's all. So that was all about your today's class, and tomorrow you have a test, okay, and the test portion is till where I have taught today, okay, from last class, last Saturday, I think, from magnetron to basic antenna parameters till today's class. Whatever I have taught is there in your quiz 2, assignment 1, quiz 2, and quiz 2 starts at 11 o'clock. Again, it is same as you have given the first quiz. So it will be scheduled in the assignment. Google form will, Microsoft form will be there, quiz form will be there. Then and there itself you will get the answer. It exactly starts at 11 o'clock, and tomorrow I will be completing my portion. So that's all. So let us meet tomorrow. Okay. Shall we stop? Shall we stop?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.